I was 24 years old when my mother-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "Stay quiet, you're poor. This isn't your place to speak." We were standing in the cold, sterile hallway of St. Mary's Hospital. My husband's grandfather had just been rushed into emergency surgery. The waiting room was packed with his family. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely knew. Everyone dressed in expensive coats and designer shoes. And then there was me, in my clearance rack jeans and a sweater I'd owned since high school. I'd been married to Daniel for only 8 months. 8 months of trying to fit into a world that made it clear I didn't belong. His family never said it directly before tonight, but I felt it in every glance, every fake smile, every time they talked about their circle and looked past me like I was invisible. "Someone needs to stay with Grandpa tonight," Daniel's father announced, his voice booming across the waiting area. He was tall, silver-haired, the kind of man used to being obeyed. "We'll take shifts. Family only." "I can stay," I offered quietly, stepping forward. That's when she said it. My mother-in-law, Caroline, with her pearl necklace and her cold, sharp eyes. "Stay quiet, you're poor. This isn't your place to speak." The room went silent. Every single person turned to look at me. My cheeks burned. My throat tightened. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Daniel stood beside his mother. He said nothing. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. "Mom, come on," his sister Ashley muttered, but even she didn't sound like she disagreed. Just embarrassed that it was said out loud. I stood there frozen, humiliated. My hands were shaking, so I shoved them into my pockets. "She's not even working right now," Caroline continued, turning to the others like I wasn't even there. "What could she possibly contribute? We're the ones paying for everything." That wasn't true. I'd been working 2 jobs before the wedding, saving every penny. But Daniel convinced me to quit after we got married. He said he wanted to take care of me, that I didn't need to work so hard anymore. Now I had nothing. No job, no savings left, no voice. "I just wanted to help," I whispered. "Help?" Caroline laughed. It was sharp and cruel. "Sweetheart, you can't even help yourself." I looked at Daniel again, begging him with my eyes. "Say something, anything." He looked down at his phone. I felt my chest collapse. The walls of that hospital started closing in. I turned and walked toward the bathroom, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall in front of them. Inside the cold, fluorescent-lit restroom, I gripped the sink and stared at my reflection. I looked small, tired, broken. But then I remembered something. Something I hadn't told anyone. 3 months ago, Grandpa Joe had called me. He was the only one in that family who ever treated me like I mattered. He'd asked for help, said he needed surgery but didn't want to burden his children with the cost. They were too busy with their own lives, he said. I gave him $15,000, everything I had left from my savings, everything I'd worked for. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. Grandpa Joe made me promise to keep it between us. "They don't need to know, sweetheart," he'd said on the phone. "This is between you and me." I wiped my eyes and walked back out into that hallway. My heart was pounding, but I held my head high. And that's when I saw him, Dr. Harrison, the surgeon, walking straight toward the family with a clipboard in his hands. "Family of Joseph Whitman?" he called out. Everyone turned. Caroline stepped forward immediately, her hand on her chest like she was the star of the show. "Yes, that's us." "How is he?" Dr. Harrison smiled. "The surgery went perfectly. He's going to make a full recovery." The family erupted in relieved whispers and thank yous. But then Dr. Harrison's eyes scanned the crowd, and they landed on me. "Is Mrs. Emma Whitman here?" I froze. Everyone turned to stare at me. "Yes," I said quietly, stepping forward. "That's me." Dr. Harrison's face softened. He walked toward me, past Caroline, past Daniel's father, past all of them. And then he reached out his hand. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "I wanted to personally thank you." I didn't understand. My heart was racing. "Thank me?" "Yes," he said, looking me directly in the eyes. "For the $15,000. The hallway went dead silent. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel every pair of eyes burning into me, Caroline's mouth hung open slightly, her perfectly painted lips parted in shock. Daniel's father's expression shifted from confusion to something I couldn't quite read. Ashley stopped mid-scroll on her phone, staring at me like I'd just announced I was an alien. And Daniel, my husband. He looked at me like he'd never seen me before. "I'm sorry, what?" Caroline finally managed to say, her voice tight and strained. Dr. Harrison smiled warmly at me, completely unaware of the bomb he'd just dropped. "Your daughter-in-law here made it possible for Mr. Whitman to have this surgery. 3 months ago, he came to us needing a cardiac procedure that wasn't fully covered by insurance. The family fund he'd set up had been, well, let's just say it wasn't accessible at the time." He looked around at the others now, his smile fading slightly as he sensed the tension. Emma stepped in without hesitation. $15,000, paid in full. Mr. Whitman made me promise not to say anything until after the surgery, but now that he's stable, I felt you all should know what an incredible woman you have in your family. I couldn't breathe. I hadn't wanted this. I never wanted them to know. That's not possible," Caroline said, her voice rising. "She doesn't have that kind of money. She doesn't even work." Dr. Harrison's smile disappeared completely. He looked at Caroline with the kind of polite coldness only a professional can deliver. "I assure you, Mrs. Whitman, the payment was very real. I processed it myself." "Emma?" Daniel's voice cracked as he said my name. He stepped toward me, his face pale. "Is this true?" I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear. But instead, I lifted my chin and looked him straight in the eye. "Yes." "Where did you get $15,000? His father demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion. "I worked for it," I said simply. My voice was steadier than I felt. "Before we got married, I saved everything. And you just gave it away?" Ashley said, her tone laced with disbelief. "To Grandpa Joe. He needed help," I said quietly. "He asked me, so I helped him." Caroline let out a bitter laugh. "This is ridiculous. Joseph would have told us if he needed money. He wouldn't go to her." "But he did go to her," Dr. Harrison said firmly, his professional demeanor shifting into something more protective. "And frankly, it saved his life. The surgery couldn't wait any longer." Caroline's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to say something, but Daniel's father cut her off. "We need to speak to Joseph," he said coldly. "Immediately." "He's still in recovery," Dr. Harrison said. "He won't be awake for another hour or so. But I can assure you—" "We'll wait," Caroline snapped. Dr. Harrison nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on me for a moment. There was something in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe. Or respect. "Mrs. Whitman," he said gently. "If you'd like to see him first when he wakes up, I can arrange that. He specifically asked for you." "No." Caroline's voice was sharp as a whip. "Absolutely not. We are his family. We will see him first." "With all due respect," Dr. Harrison said, his tone now ice cold. "I take my orders from my patient." "And Mr. Whitman was very clear about who he wanted by his side." Caroline's face twisted with rage. "This is insane," she hissed, stepping closer to me. "You manipulated him. You wormed your way into his life, into his wallet." "That's enough," a voice said from behind us. We all turned. Standing at the end of the hallway was a young man in his early 20s, tall with messy dark hair and tired eyes. He wore a leather jacket and jeans, and he looked like he'd just walked out of a rainstorm. It was Marcus, Grandpa Joe's grandson from his first marriage, Daniel's half-cousin, the one the family pretended didn't exist. "Marcus," Daniel said, his voice filled with surprise. "What are you doing here?" Marcus walked toward us slowly, his hands in his pockets. His eyes were locked on Caroline. "I'm here because Grandpa Joe called me," he said calmly. 3 months ago, right after Emma helped him." My heart skipped a beat. "He told me everything," Marcus continued, stopping a few feet away from Caroline, "about how he asked his own children for help, and how every single one of you said no." The hallway went silent again. Daniel's father's jaw tightened. Ashley looked away. Caroline's face went pale. "That's not—" she started. "Don't," Marcus said sharply, cutting her off. Don't lie, not here. Not now. He turned to me and his expression softened. Emma, he said gently, Grandpa Joe told me what you did. He cried when he told me. He said you were the only one who didn't treat him like a burden. Tears stung my eyes. I blinked them back, refusing to break. Marcus looked back at the family, his gaze hard. You people are unbelievable. You show up here in your expensive clothes, acting like you care, but when he actually needed you, you were too busy. We didn't know it was serious, Ashley said weakly. He told you it was serious, Marcus shot back, his voice rising. He told all of you, and you brushed him off. Daniel stepped forward, his face red. Marcus, you don't know what you're talking about. We've been taking care of Dad our whole lives. By taking care of him, you mean controlling him, Marcus said coldly. Taking his money, using his name. But the second he needed something real, you vanished. I stood there, frozen, as the truth I'd never known unfolded in front of me. And then Marcus turned to Dr. Harrison. When can she see him? Dr. Harrison glanced at me, then at the family. 15 minutes. Marcus nodded. Then he looked at me and smiled. Come on, Emma. Let's get some air while we wait. I followed Marcus down the hallway, my legs shaking with every step. Behind us, I could hear Caroline's voice rising in sharp, frantic whispers. Daniel called my name once, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Marcus pushed open the heavy door that led to the hospital's back courtyard. Cold night air hit my face and I gasped, realizing I'd been holding my breath for what felt like hours. The courtyard was empty except for a few benches and a flickering street lamp. Marcus walked to the farthest bench and sat down, patting the space beside him. I sat, wrapping my arms around myself. The adrenaline was wearing off, and now I just felt cold, exhausted, confused. You okay? Marcus asked quietly. I let out a shaky laugh. I don't know. He nodded like he understood. For a moment, we just sat there in silence, watching our breath form clouds in the freezing air. I didn't know he asked them for help, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. He never told me that part. Marcus leaned back against the bench, his jaw tight. Yeah, 3 months ago, Grandpa Joe called a family meeting. Said he needed surgery, that insurance wouldn't cover all of it, and he needed about $20,000 to make it happen. 20,000? I repeated. My chest tightened. I'd only given him 15. Caroline said they couldn't afford it right now. Said they'd just invested in a new vacation property in the Hamptons. Marcus's voice dripped with bitterness. Daniel's dad said his portfolio was tied up. Ashley said she'd just bought a new car and couldn't touch her savings. I felt sick. They all said no? I whispered. Every single one of them, Marcus said. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes sad but steady. Grandpa Joe was devastated. He told me he felt like a burden. Like his own kids saw him as an expense, not a person. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. He called me 2 days after that meeting. He didn't tell me any of this. He just said he needed help and didn't want to bother Daniel with it. That's because he knew Daniel would say no too, Marcus said softly. Or worse, he'd say yes and then hold it over Grandpa's head for the rest of his life. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, my throat tight. Why didn't you help him? If you knew, I was going to, Marcus said quickly. I told him I'd get him the money. I was selling my car, picking up extra shifts, doing everything I could, but I was short about $5,000 and I needed another month. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. And then he told me you'd already done it, that you'd given him $15,000 without even blinking. He said you told him, family helps family, Grandpa Joe. That's what we do. I remembered saying that. I remembered his voice shaking on the phone, the way he'd cried and said, You're an angel, Emma. A real angel. He made me promise not to tell anyone, I said quietly. He said he didn't want them to feel guilty. Marcus laughed bitterly. Of course he did. He spent his whole life protecting them, even when they don't deserve it. A gust of wind blew through the courtyard and I shivered. Marcus immediately shrugged off his leather jacket and draped it over my shoulders. You don't have to, I started. Take it, he said firmly. You've been cold since the moment I saw you in that hallway. He wasn't wrong. I pulled the jacket tighter around me, grateful for the warmth. Why are you here, Marcus? I asked. I mean, I know Grandpa Joe called you, but the family acts like you don't exist. His jaw tightened again. That's because my mom wasn't good enough for them either. I looked at him and suddenly it clicked. Your mom was Grandpa Joe's first wife? Yeah. She died when I was 10. Cancer. His voice was flat, like he'd told this story too many times. After she passed, Grandpa Joe remarried. That's when Caroline came into the picture. She never liked me, said I was a reminder of the past. So when I turned 18, they made it pretty clear I wasn't welcome at family events anymore. That's horrible, I whispered. Marcus shrugged. It is what it is. But Grandpa Joe never stopped calling me. Never stopped checking in. He's the only one in that family who ever gave a damn about me. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen from anyone in Daniel's family before. Respect. You're a good person, Emma, he said quietly. Too good for them. Before I could respond, the courtyard door flew open. Daniel stormed out, his face red with anger. Emma, what the hell is going on? I stood up slowly, my heart pounding. Marcus stood too, positioning himself slightly in front of me. I've been calling you, Daniel snapped, ignoring Marcus entirely. You just walked away, in the middle of a family crisis. A family crisis? I repeated, my voice shaking. Your mother just humiliated me in front of everyone, Daniel. She told me to stay quiet because I'm poor. And you said nothing. She was upset. Daniel shot back. Her father-in-law just had surgery. She wasn't thinking clearly. She knew exactly what she was saying. My voice echoed in the courtyard. Daniel flinched. And so did you, I continued, my hands trembling. You stood there and let her say those things to me. You didn't defend me. You didn't even look at me. Emma, come on, Daniel said, his tone softening into something that might have been guilt. You know how my mom is. She doesn't mean half of what she says. She meant every word, Marcus said coldly. Daniel finally looked at him, his expression hardening. Stay out of this, Marcus. This is between me and my wife. Your wife, Marcus repeated slowly, just saved your grandfather's life. While your entire family stood by and did nothing. Daniel's face flushed. We didn't know. You did know, Marcus interrupted. Grandpa Joe told you. He told all of you, and you said no. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he had nothing to say. Emma, he finally said, his voice quieter now. Why didn't you tell me? About the money. About helping Grandpa. I stared at him. At this man I'd married 8 months ago. This man I thought I knew. Because he asked me not to, I said simply. And because I knew if I told you, you'd find a way to make me feel guilty for it. Daniel's eyes widened. That's not fair, isn't it? I said, my voice breaking. You convinced me to quit my jobs, Daniel. You said you'd take care of me. And then your family treats me like I'm worthless and you just let them. The door opened again. This time it was Dr. Harrison. Mrs. Whitman, he said gently, looking at me. Mr. Joseph is awake. He's asking for you. I walked back into that hospital like I was walking into battle. Marcus stayed close beside me. Daniel followed a few steps behind, silent now. His earlier anger had dissolved into something else. Guilt, maybe, or confusion. I didn't care anymore. Dr. Harrison led us down a long, sterile corridor toward the recovery wing. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of disinfectant made my stomach turn. He's still weak, Dr. Harrison said softly as we walked. But he's stable. And very alert. He's been asking for you every few minutes since he woke up. My throat tightened. Is his family in there? No, Dr. Harrison said, and I caught the edge in his voice. He specifically asked to see you first. Alone. Behind me, I heard Daniel inhale sharply, but he didn't say anything. We stopped outside a door marked Recovery 7. Dr. Harrison turned to face us. Only Mrs. Emma Whitman for now, he said firmly, looking directly at Daniel. Those are the patient's wishes. That's my grandfather, Daniel said, his voice strained. And those are his wishes, Dr. Harrison repeated. his tone leaving no room for argument. Marcus put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Let her go in, man. Respect what Grandpa Joe wants. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he stepped back. His eyes met mine for just a moment, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Fear. Dr. Harrison opened the door for me. Take your time, he said gently. I stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of monitors and machines. Grandpa Joe lay in the hospital bed looking so much smaller than I remembered. Tubes ran from his arms, and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside him. But his eyes were open, and when he saw me, his whole face lit up. Emma, he whispered, his voice raspy and weak. I rushed to his side, grabbing his hand. It felt cold and fragile in mine. Grandpa Joe, I'm here. I'm right here. His eyes filled with tears. They told you. The doctor told everyone, I said softly, squeezing his hand. About the money. He closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his weathered cheek. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I asked him not to say anything until I could talk to you first. It's okay, I whispered, even though it wasn't. Even though everything had just exploded in the worst possible way. No, he said, his voice stronger now. It's not okay. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 3 months ago. I leaned closer. What is it? Grandpa Joe's grip on my hand tightened. When I called my children for help. When I told them I needed that surgery. Do you know what Caroline said to me? I shook my head, my heart pounding. She said, Dad, you've lived a good long life. Maybe it's time to just let nature take its course. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She said that? Right to my face, he whispered, his voice breaking. My own daughter-in-law told me I should just die rather than ask them for money. Grandpa Joe. Robert, my son, Daniel's father. He didn't say it that bluntly. But he agreed with her, said the surgery was risky anyway, that maybe I should focus on quality of life instead of expensive interventions. My blood ran cold. They wanted you to die, I whispered, the words tasting like poison. They wanted my money, he corrected bitterly. They've been circling it like vultures for years, waiting. And if I died without that surgery, they'd get everything. The house, the investments, the life insurance. He paused, catching his breath. The monitor beside him beeped a little faster. But then you, he continued, squeezing my hand. You gave me everything you had. You didn't ask questions. You didn't make me feel like a burden. You just said yes. Tears streamed down my face. Your family. That's what family does. No, sweetheart, he said, his voice fierce despite his weakness. That's what you do. That's who you are. But them? He shook his head. They're not family. They're parasites. The door suddenly burst open. Caroline stormed in, her face twisted with rage. Robert and Ashley were right behind her. Daniel brought up the rear, looking torn and miserable. Get away from him, Caroline hissed at me. I stood my ground, still holding Grandpa Joe's hand. He asked for me. I don't care what he asked for, Caroline spat. She turned to Grandpa Joe, her voice taking on a sickeningly sweet tone. Dad, you're confused. The medication is making you say things you don't mean. I mean every word, Grandpa Joe said, his voice suddenly strong and clear. And I'm not confused. Caroline's fake smile faltered. Dad, please. You need to rest. We can talk about all this later. We'll talk about it now, he said firmly. He looked at Robert. You told me to let nature take its course. Remember that? Robert's face went pale. Dad, I was trying to protect you from unnecessary suffering. You were trying to protect your inheritance, Grandpa Joe shot back. Ashley gasped. Grandpa, that's not fair. Fair? Grandpa Joe's voice rose, making the monitor beep faster. You want to talk about fair? I asked you for help, and you told me you just bought a new BMW, a $70,000 car, but you couldn't spare $20,000 to save my life. Ashley's face crumbled. She looked at the floor. And you, Grandpa Joe said, his gaze landing on Caroline. You looked me in the eye and told me it was my time to go. Like I was a dog you were putting down. That is not what I meant, Caroline shrieked. Then what did you mean? I said, my voice cold and steady. Because it sounds pretty clear to me. Caroline whirled on me, her eyes blazing. You manipulative little— That's enough, a new voice said from the doorway. We all turned. Standing there was a woman in her 50s, dressed in an elegant black suit. She carried a leather briefcase and had the air of someone who commanded respect without trying. Who are you? Robert demanded. The woman stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. My name is Margaret Chen, she said calmly. I'm Mr. Joseph Whitman's attorney. The room went deathly silent. Margaret Chen walked past all of them like they were furniture, moving directly to Grandpa Joe's bedside. She smiled warmly at him, the kind of smile that held years of friendship and respect. Joseph, she said softly, it's good to see you awake. Margaret, Grandpa Joe said, his voice filled with relief. Thank you for coming. Of course, she said. Then she turned to face the family, her warm smile vanishing instantly. I apologize for the intrusion, but Mr. Whitman called me this morning before his surgery. He asked me to be here when he woke up. Why would he need a lawyer at the hospital? Caroline asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Margaret's expression remained perfectly neutral. Because he wanted to make sure certain legal matters were addressed while his family was present. Robert stepped forward, his face tight. What legal matters? Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Matters concerning Mr. Whitman's estate, his assets, and recent changes he's made to his will. The air in the room shifted. I felt it immediately. The sudden tension, the way everyone seemed to lean forward at once. Changes? Ashley whispered. What changes? Margaret looked at Grandpa Joe. Would you like me to proceed? He nodded weakly. Yes, I want them to hear this. All of them. Margaret pulled out a document and held it up. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Whitman contacted me to make significant revisions to his last will and testament. These revisions were made of his own free will, witnessed by myself and 2 other attorneys, and are legally binding. Dad, what did you do? Robert said, his voice rising. I protected what's mine, Grandpa Joe said simply. Margaret continued, her voice calm and professional. Previously, Mr. Whitman's estate, which includes his home valued at approximately $1.2 million, investment accounts totaling $800,000, and a life insurance policy worth $500,000, was to be divided equally among his 3 children and their families. Caroline's eyes lit up. I could practically see her doing the math. However, Margaret said, her voice dropping slightly, Mr. Whitman has removed 2 of his children as beneficiaries. What? Robert roared. You can't do that, Caroline shrieked, rushing toward the bed. That money is ours. We've been waiting. She stopped mid-sentence, realizing what she'd just said. Waiting for me to die? Grandpa Joe finished for her, his voice cold. Yes, Caroline. I know. Ashley was crying now, her hands covering her mouth. Grandpa, please. This isn't fair. We're family. Family, Grandpa Joe repeated bitterly. You want to talk about family? Where were you when I needed you? When I called you, desperate, scared, telling you I needed surgery to survive? We thought you were exaggerating, Ashley sobbed. We thought it wasn't that serious. I told you I was dying, Grandpa Joe shouted, his voice cracking. The heart monitor beeped frantically. I told all of you, and you looked at your bank accounts and decided I wasn't worth it. Dr. Harrison suddenly appeared in the doorway. You need to calm down, Mr. Whitman. Your heart rate— I'll calm down when I'm done, Grandpa Joe snapped. He looked at Margaret. Tell them everything. Margaret nodded. As of 3 weeks ago, the primary beneficiary of Joseph Whitman's entire estate is his grandson, Marcus Whitman. Marcus, who'd been standing silently in the corner, looked up in shock. Grandpa, I didn't know. I know you didn't, Grandpa Joe said gently, looking at him. But you're the only one who never asked me for anything. The only one who called just to see how I was doing. The only one who loved me without counting my money. Robert's face was purple with rage. This is insane. Marcus isn't even part of this family. His mother was my wife, Grandpa Joe said sharply, and she was worth 10 of you. Additionally, Margaret continued, clearly enjoying this, Mr. Whitman has designated a secondary beneficiary to receive $200,000 from his estate, to be paid immediately upon the execution of this will. Everyone froze. Who? Caroline whispered, though I could see in her eyes that she already knew. Margaret turned to me, and for the first time she smiled. Emma Whitman! The room exploded. No, Caroline screamed. Absolutely not. She's been manipulating him. She gave him that money to buy his love. She gave me that money to save my life, Grandpa Joe said, his voice strong despite his exhaustion. While you were picking out vacation homes and luxury cars. Daniel finally spoke, his voice small and broken. Grandpa, you can't do this. She's my wife. If you give her money, it's technically marital property. Actually, Margaret interrupted smoothly, the funds will be placed in a trust accessible only to Emma. Per Mr. Whitman's explicit instructions, these funds cannot be touched, accessed, or claimed by her spouse in the event of a divorce. My head was spinning. Grandpa Joe, I don't want your money. I never did this for... I know you didn't, he said, tears streaming down his face. That's exactly why you're getting it. You're the only one who ever helped me without expecting anything in return. Robert lunged forward, his face contorted with fury. You senile old man. This is financial abuse. We'll contest this will. We'll have you declared mentally incompetent. Good luck with that, Margaret said coolly. Mr. Whitman underwent a full psychological evaluation 2 weeks ago. He's been deemed completely sound of mind. I have the documentation right here. She pulled out another paper and held it up like a shield. Caroline turned on me, her face twisted with pure hatred. You gold-digging little whore. You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? Married Daniel to get close to the family money? Enough! Everyone turned. Daniel stood in the middle of the room, his fists clenched, his face red. He was shaking. Mom, stop, he said, his voice breaking. Just stop. Caroline stared at her son in disbelief. Daniel, she's stealing your inheritance. She saved his life, Daniel shouted. Don't you get it? Emma gave away everything she had to save Grandpa Joe. His voice cracked. While we told him to die. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel looked at me, and I saw something collapse behind his eyes. I'm so sorry, he whispered. But before I could respond, Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression changed. There's someone else here to see you, Joseph, she said quietly. Someone you'll want to meet. Margaret walked to the door and opened it. A young woman stepped inside. She looked about my age, maybe 25, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and nervous eyes. She wore scrubs, a hospital employee, and she clutched a manila envelope against her chest like it was a lifeline. Who is this? Caroline demanded, her voice still sharp despite everything. The young woman's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Grandpa Joe. Her face softened immediately. Mr. Whitman, she said, her voice gentle. I'm so glad you're okay. Grandpa Joe's eyes widened. Sophie? She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Yes, sir. It's me. Who the hell is Sophie? Robert barked. Sophie flinched at his tone. I instinctively stepped closer to her, and she gave me a grateful look. Sophie Martinez, Margaret answered calmly. She's a nurse here at St. Mary's. She's been caring for Mr. Whitman during his pre-op appointments for the past 4 months. I don't understand, Ashley said, wiping her tears. Why is a nurse here? This is a family matter. She's here, Grandpa Joe said quietly, because she tried to save my life too. Everyone went still. Sophie's hands trembled as she held the envelope tighter. Mr. Whitman, I really shouldn't be here. I could get in trouble. You won't, Margaret said firmly. I made sure of that. Tell them what you told me. Sophie took a deep breath. She looked terrified, but she stepped forward anyway. 4 months ago, she began, her voice shaking. Mr. Whitman came in for his initial cardiac consultation. I was assigned as his primary care nurse. During one of his appointments, he broke down. He told me his family had refused to help him pay for the surgery. Caroline made a disgusted sound. So you're another vulture who... I gave him $3,000, Sophie said, cutting her off. The room went silent again. It was everything in my savings account, Sophie continued, her voice stronger now. I'm a single mom. I have a 6-year-old daughter. That money was supposed to be for her birthday and Christmas. But Mr. Whitman was crying in that exam room, saying he was going to die because his own children didn't think he was worth saving. Her voice cracked. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. I felt tears streaming down my face. This girl, this stranger, had given up everything for someone she barely knew. Just like I had. Mr. Whitman tried to refuse it, Sophie said, looking at him with such tenderness. But I told him the same thing my abuela used to tell me. We don't turn our backs on people who need help. Ever. Sophie, Grandpa Joe whispered, his own tears falling now. You didn't have to... Yes, I did, she said firmly. Because that's what decent people do. The weight of her words hung in the air, a direct accusation to everyone in that room who'd failed him. Marcus was the first to move. He walked over to Sophie and held out his hand. Thank you, he said simply. She shook it, nodding. This is ridiculous, Robert said, but his voice had lost its fire. He sounded defeated now. So what, you're giving her money too? Yes, Grandpa Joe said. Margaret, tell them. Margaret pulled out another document. Sophie Martinez is also named in Mr. Whitman's revised will. She will receive $50,000 to be paid immediately. Sophie gasped. Mr. Whitman, no. I can't. That's too much. It's not enough, Grandpa Joe said firmly. You have a daughter. You gave up her Christmas to save my life. This is the least I can do. Sophie started crying, covering her face with her hands. I moved to her side and put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, and we held each other. Two women who'd done the right thing and were now being rewarded while a family fell apart around us. So let me get this straight, Caroline said, her voice dripping with venom. You're giving your estate to Marcus, $200,000 to her, she pointed at me, and $50,000 to some random nurse? What about your actual family? My actual family, Grandpa Joe said coldly, left me to die. We didn't leave you to die, Ashley screamed. We just thought... You thought your new car was more important than my life, Grandpa Joe finished. You thought a vacation house was more valuable than your father. You thought wrong. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the floor. His hands were shaking. Daniel, Grandpa Joe said softly. Daniel looked up, his eyes red. I haven't decided what to do about you yet, Grandpa Joe said. You're still in the will, for now. But that can change. Grandpa, please. Daniel started. You stood by and watched your mother humiliate your wife, Grandpa Joe said, his voice hard. You let her call Emma poor, worthless, not good enough. And you said nothing. I was scared, Daniel blurted out, his voice breaking completely. I was scared if I stood up to them, they'd cut me off. Cut us off. I was trying to protect our future? By destroying your present? I said quietly. Daniel turned to me, and I saw him truly see me for maybe the first time in months. Emma, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at this man I'd married. This man who'd promised to protect me, to honor me, to stand by me. This man who'd watched me get torn apart and done nothing. I know you are, I said softly. But sorry doesn't fix this, Daniel. Before he could respond, the door opened again. Dr. Harrison stepped in, looking concerned. I'm sorry, but Mr. Whitman really needs to rest now. His vitals are showing stress and... One more thing, Grandpa Joe said, his voice weak but determined. Margaret, give her the envelope. Margaret pulled out one final envelope from her briefcase. She walked over and handed it to me. What is this? I asked. Open it, Grandpa Joe said. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper. A deed. That's the deed to my house, Grandpa Joe said. As of yesterday, it's in your name, Emma. The house is yours. What? Caroline's shriek was inhuman. The 1.2 million house? Robert stammered. You gave it to her? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Grandpa Joe, I can't accept this. You can and you will, he said firmly. That house has been in my family for 40 years. And I'm not leaving it to people who wished me dead. I'm leaving it to someone who actually loves me. Caroline lunged at me, her hands outstretched like claws. You bitch! You stole everything from us. But Marcus was faster. He grabbed Caroline's arm and pulled her back. Touch her, Marcus said, his voice deadly calm, and I'll have you arrested for assault. Security burst through the door seconds later, summoned by Dr. Harrison. Everyone except Emma, Marcus, and Sophie needs to leave, Dr. Harrison said firmly. Now. Security escorted Caroline, Robert, and Ashley out of the room. Their protests echoed down the hallway, screaming about lawyers, about contesting the will, about how this wasn't over. Daniel was the last to leave. He stood in the doorway, looking back at me with desperate, broken eyes. Emma, please, he whispered. Can we talk later? I didn't answer. I just looked at him until he finally turned and walked away. The door closed and suddenly the room felt peaceful. Just me, Marcus, Sophie, Margaret, Dr. Harrison, and Grandpa Joe. Thank you, Grandpa Joe said to Dr. Harrison, for getting them out. Dr. Harrison nodded. You need to rest now, Joseph. Your heart can't take much more stress today. I know, Grandpa Joe said. He looked at the three of us, me, Marcus, and Sophie, and smiled. But I needed to do this while I still had the strength. While everyone was here to witness it. You could have told us privately, Marcus said quietly. You didn't have to do it like this. Yes, I did, Grandpa Joe said. Because they needed to see it. They needed to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people like garbage and still expect their loyalty. Sophie wiped her eyes. Mr. Whitman, I really can't accept that much money. It's too generous. Sophie, he interrupted gently. What's your daughter's name? Isabella, Sophie said softly. Isabella, Grandpa Joe repeated, smiling. That's beautiful. How old is she? 6. She just started first grade. 6 years old, Grandpa Joe said. And you were willing to give up her Christmas, her birthday, everything, for a stranger in a hospital bed. Do you know how rare that is? Sophie shook her head, tears falling faster now. That money isn't charity, Grandpa Joe said firmly. It's a thank you. Use it for Isabella. Put her through college someday. Buy her everything you couldn't afford this year. Live your life knowing that doing the right thing matters, that it means something. Sophie nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Harrison checked the monitors. Joseph, I really need you to rest now. Your blood pressure. I know, Grandpa Joe said. He looked at me. Emma, come here. I moved closer to his bedside. He reached out and took my hand in both of his. You saved my life, he said, his voice barely above a whisper now. And you asked for nothing in return. You're the daughter I should have had. My throat closed up. Grandpa Joe. That house, he continued, squeezing my hand. It's not just bricks and wood. It's filled with 50 years of memories. Good ones. Before the money and the greed corrupted everything. I want you to make new memories there. Happy ones. I will, I promised, tears streaming down my face. I promise. And Marcus, Grandpa Joe said, looking at him. You take care of these girls, you hear me? Emma and Sophie. They're family now. Real family. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight with emotion. I will, Grandpa. I promise. Grandpa Joe smiled. Then his eyes started to close. Rest now, Dr. Harrison said gently. We'll be right outside if you need anything. We filed out of the room quietly. Margaret left to handle some legal paperwork. Dr. Harrison went to check on other patients. That left just the three of us standing in the hallway, me, Marcus, and Sophie. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Sophie let out a shaky laugh. I can't believe that just happened. Me neither, I admitted. Marcus leaned against the wall, running his hands through his hair. Did my family really just get disinherited in front of a lawyer and hospital staff? Yes, I said. Yes, they did. We all looked at each other and suddenly, inexplicably, we started laughing. Not happy laughter. The kind of laughter that comes when you're so overwhelmed you don't know what else to do. I'm sorry, Sophie said, wiping her eyes. This isn't funny. Your family is probably going to sue everyone. Let them try, Marcus said darkly. Margaret doesn't lose cases. And Grandpa Joe has documentation for everything. I leaned against the wall beside Marcus, suddenly exhausted. What do I do now? What do you mean? Sophie asked. I gestured vaguely. My husband's family hates me. My marriage is probably over. I just inherited a house I never expected. I don't even know where to begin. Marcus looked at me seriously. Do you love him, Daniel? I opened my mouth to say yes automatically, but the word wouldn't come. I thought I did, I said quietly. But the man I fell in love with wouldn't have let his mother treat me that way. The man I married wouldn't have stood there and watched me get humiliated. Then you know what you need to do, Marcus said gently. I did? I just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. What about you? I asked Sophie, changing the subject. Are you working tonight? She shook her head. I was supposed to, but I called in when Margaret contacted me. My neighbor is watching Isabella. You should go home, I said. Be with your daughter, Sophie smiled. I will. But first, she pulled out her phone. Can I get your number? I know this is weird, but I feel like we're connected now. All three of us. We did something good, and we're all being punished by people who don't understand what that means. We're not being punished, Marcus said firmly. We're being rewarded. There's a difference. I gave Sophie my number. She gave me hers. Then she hugged me. A real hug, tight and warm and genuine. Thank you, she whispered. For being there. For understanding. Thank you, I whispered back. For showing me I'm not alone. She pulled away, wiped her eyes one more time, and headed toward the elevator. Marcus and I stood there in silence for a moment. You hungry? He finally asked. I realized I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Starving. There's a diner 2 blocks from here. Open all night. Terrible coffee, but amazing pancakes. That sounds perfect. We took the elevator down in silence. As we walked through the hospital lobby, I saw them. Daniel and his family, huddled in the corner. Caroline was on her phone, probably calling a lawyer. Robert was pacing. Ashley was crying. And Daniel was just sitting there, staring at nothing. He looked up as I walked past. Our eyes met. I saw the question there, the plea, the desperate hope that I'd stop, that I'd say it was okay, that we could fix this. But I didn't stop. I walked right past him and out into the cold night air. Marcus fell into step beside me. You okay? No, I admitted. But I will be. We walked in silence for a while. The city was quiet at this hour, just the occasional car passing by and the distant sound of sirens. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Sure. Why did you really give Grandpa Joe that money? I know you wanted to help him. But $15,000 is everything. You gave up your entire safety net. I thought about that. About the real answer. Because, I said slowly, for the first time since I married into that family, someone treated me like I mattered. Like my opinion had value. Like I was more than just the poor girl who married up. I stopped walking and looked at Marcus. Grandpa Joe called me and asked for help. Not demanded. Not expected. Asked, like I was an equal. Like I had something valuable to offer. My voice cracked. Nobody in that family has ever made me feel that way. Marcus pulled me into a hug. I cried into his leather jacket, all the emotion of the night finally crashing over me. You matter, Emma, he said quietly. You always mattered. They were just too blind to see it. When I finally pulled away, wiping my eyes, I saw someone standing across the street, watching us. It was a woman I'd never seen before. Older, maybe 60, dressed in an expensive coat. She was staring directly at me with an expression I couldn't read. Marcus, I said quietly. Who is that? He turned to look, and his entire body went rigid. Oh no, he whispered. What? Who is she? Marcus's face had gone pale. That's Victoria. Grandpa Joe's sister. I didn't know he had a sister. Nobody talks about her, Marcus said, his voice tight. She and Grandpa Joe had a falling out 20 years ago. Over money. I've never even met her. Victoria started walking toward us, and I had a feeling this night was about to get even more complicated. Victoria crossed the street with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of wealth and power. Her heels clicked against the pavement, sharp and deliberate. As she got closer, I could see her face more clearly. High cheekbones, steely gray eyes, and a thin-lipped expression that suggested she didn't smile often. "Marcus Whitman," she said, her voice cool and measured. "You've grown." "Victoria," Marcus said stiffly. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," she replied. Her eyes shifted to me, scanning me from head to toe with cold assessment. "And who might you be?" "Emma Whitman," I said, lifting my chin. I was too exhausted to be intimidated. "Joseph's granddaughter-in-law." Something flickered across Victoria's face. "Ah, the girl who gave away $15,000. My stomach dropped. "How do you know about that?" "I have friends at this hospital," she said simply. Word travels fast when someone makes a scene in the recovery wing. "Caroline's voice carries?" She paused. "I heard everything." Marcus stepped slightly in front of me, protective. "What do you want, Victoria?" "To talk," she said. "To Emma, specifically." "About what?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Victoria glanced at Marcus. "Alone, if you don't mind." "I do mind," Marcus said immediately. "It's okay," I said, putting a hand on his arm. "I can handle this." Marcus looked at me uncertainly. "Emma, I'll be fine," I said. "Go get us a table at that diner. Order me pancakes. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. 10 minutes. If you're not there, I'm coming back. He shot Victoria one more suspicious look before walking away. Victoria watched him go, then turned her full attention to me. "Walk with me." We walked slowly down the empty sidewalk. The streetlights cast long shadows, and somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. "I haven't spoken to my brother in 20 years, Victoria said finally. "I heard. Did you hear why?" I shook my head. Victoria's jaw tightened. "Our father died and left us a business. A manufacturing company worth about $3 million at the time. Joseph wanted to sell it and split the money. I wanted to keep it running, to honor our father's legacy." She paused at a bench and sat down. I sat beside her, keeping some distance between us. "We fought," she continued. "Bitterly. Things were said that couldn't be taken back. Eventually, Joseph sold his half to an outside investor, and I was forced to sell mine too. The company was dissolved within a year." "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "Don't be," Victoria said sharply. "I made my peace with it. I took my money, invested it wisely, and built my own empire. I don't need Joseph's forgiveness or his money." She turned to look at me directly. "But I do need you to understand something." "What?" "My brother is not a saint," she said bluntly. "He's good at playing the victim, at making people feel sorry for him. But he's also manipulative. He knows how to pull heartstrings." I felt anger flare in my chest. "He didn't manipulate me. He needed help. Did he?" Victoria interrupted. "Or did he test you?" I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Victoria pulled out her phone and opened her email. She turned the screen toward me. It was a bank statement. Joseph Whitman's bank statement. "He has over $900,000 in liquid assets," Victoria said quietly. "Right there. Accessible. He could have paid for that surgery 10 times over without touching his investments." My blood ran cold. "That's not possible." He said he needed help," Victoria finished. "And technically he did. But not because he didn't have the money, Emma. Because he wanted to see who would help him when they thought he had nothing." I couldn't breathe. The world tilted sideways. "No," I whispered. "No, he wouldn't he?" Victoria's voice was softer now, almost pitying. "Think about it. He called his children first, asked them for money when he didn't actually need it. When they said no, he had all the ammunition he needed to cut them out of the will." My hands were shaking. "But Sophie, the nurse, she gave him money too." And now she's getting $50,000, Victoria said. A pretty good return on investment, wouldn't you say? Stop it, I said, my voice breaking. You're lying. You're just bitter because my brother destroyed our family's business out of spite? Victoria said. Yes, I am bitter, but I'm not lying. That bank statement is real. You can verify it yourself. She put her phone away and stood up. I came here tonight because I needed to warn you, she said. My brother is good at finding people who are desperate for love, for belonging, for validation. He gives them exactly what they need, and in return, they give him their loyalty. She looked down at me, and for the first time I saw something almost like sympathy in her eyes. You gave him $15,000, Emma. Everything you had. And now he's giving you a house worth over $1 million. Don't you see? He's not rewarding your kindness. He's buying your allegiance, making sure you'll defend him, protect him, fight for him. Get away from me, I said, standing up abruptly. Victoria didn't move. I know you don't want to believe it. You don't know anything about me, I spat. Or about Grandpa Joe. You're just a bitter old woman who can't stand that her brother moved on without you. Victoria's expression hardened. Maybe, or maybe I'm the only person willing to tell you the truth. She turned and started walking away, then stopped. One more thing, she said without turning around. Ask yourself this. Why did Joseph call his lawyer weeks before the surgery? Why did he have everything ready, all the documents prepared, unless he knew exactly how this would play out? She walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there frozen, her words echoing in my head. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. You okay? It's been 8 minutes, I texted back. Coming now. But I wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. I walked to the diner in a daze. Marcus was sitting in a booth by the window, 2 plates of pancakes already on the table. He smiled when he saw me, then his smile faded. What happened? He asked immediately. What did she say? I slid into the booth. She said Grandpa Joe has $900,000 in the bank, that he never needed our money, that this was all a test. Marcus's face went pale. That's not Emma, she's lying, is she? I asked, looking at him. How would you know? Because I've known Grandpa Joe my whole life, Marcus said desperately. He wouldn't do that. He's not that kind of person. But you said yourself the family cut you out years ago, I said quietly. When was the last time you actually saw his financial records? Talked to him about money? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. We sat in silence. I don't know what to believe anymore, I finally whispered. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand. Then let's find out the truth. Tomorrow, we'll ask Margaret for documentation. We'll ask Grandpa Joe directly. But tonight, Emma, please just eat something. You look like you're about to pass out. I picked up my fork mechanically. The pancakes tasted like sawdust. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Daniel. Please come home. We need to talk. I love you. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. Can I ask you something? I said to Marcus. Anything. Do you have a couch I can sleep on tonight? Marcus squeezed my hand. You can have my bed. I'll take the couch. Thank you. We finished eating in silence. Marcus paid the bill, and we walked to his apartment, a small 1-bedroom place about 15 minutes from the hospital. It was modest but clean. Books everywhere, a guitar in the corner, pictures on the wall of him and Grandpa Joe from years ago when Marcus was just a kid. Bathrooms through there? Marcus said, pointing. I'll get you some clothes to sleep in. He disappeared into his bedroom and came back with a t-shirt and sweatpants. I took them and changed in the bathroom. When I came out, Marcus had made up the bed with fresh sheets. Get some sleep, he said gently. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Marcus? I said as he turned to leave. Yeah? Why are you being so nice to me? You barely know me, he smiled sadly. Because Grandpa Joe loves you, and I trust his judgment, even if he trailed off. Even if Victoria's right? I finished. She's not, Marcus said firmly. She can't be. But neither of us sounded convinced. I climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. Through the thin walls, I could hear Marcus moving around in the living room, settling onto the couch. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but all I could see was Victoria's cold gray eyes. All I could hear was her voice. "He's buying your allegiance." And somewhere deep in my chest, a terrible question started forming. What if she was right? I didn't sleep. I lay there in Marcus's bed, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across the walls as cars passed outside. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Victoria's face, heard her words, saw that bank statement. $900,000. Grandpa Joe had $900,000 just sitting in his account. He could have paid for the surgery himself. He could have paid for it 20 times over. But he'd called his children and asked for help. Then he'd called me. Then Sophie. Testing us. My stomach twisted. I grabbed my phone and turned it on. 17 missed calls from Daniel. 12 text messages. The last one, sent 20 minutes ago, simply said, "I'm sorry. For everything. Please just tell me you're safe." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my browser and typed, "Joseph Whitman net worth." Nothing came up. I tried Joseph Whitman assets and Joseph Whitman investments. Still nothing public. I was about to give up when I remembered something. Grandpa Joe had mentioned a family fund. Dr. Harrison had said it wasn't accessible at the time. What did that mean? I crept out of bed quietly and opened the bedroom door. Marcus was asleep on the couch, one arm thrown over his eyes, his chest rising and falling steadily. I tiptoed to the kitchen and made coffee as quietly as possible. Dawn was just starting to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. I sat at the small kitchen table with my phone and started searching again. This time I looked for Joseph Whitman will and Joseph Whitman estate planning. That's when I found it. An old newspaper article from 15 years ago. A local business section piece about successful family businesses in the area. There was a photo of a much younger Joseph Whitman standing in front of a manufacturing plant. The headline read, "Local businessman sells company for $8 million, plans retirement. $8 million. 15 years ago. My hands started shaking. "Emma?" I jumped, nearly dropping my phone. Marcus was standing in the doorway, his hair messy from sleep, squinting at me in concern. "You're up early," he said. I couldn't sleep. My voice sounded hollow. He walked over and sat across from me, immediately noticing my expression. "What's wrong? What did you find?" I turned my phone toward him. "Did you know about this?" Marcus read the article, his face growing pale. "No. I mean, I knew he'd owned a business with Victoria. But I thought they'd just broken even when they sold. I didn't know it was $8 million. That was 15 years ago," I said quietly. Even if he'd spent half of it, invested the rest conservatively, Victoria was right. He's been rich this entire time. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. Maybe he lost it. Bad investments, the recession. Or maybe, I interrupted, he's exactly who Victoria said he is. We sat in heavy silence. "I need to see him," I said finally. "I need to ask him directly." Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay, but Emma promised me something." "What?" "Don't go in there angry. Just ask. Let him explain. Give him that chance." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But Marcus was right. "Okay," I said. "Let's go." We got dressed and drove back to the hospital in Marcus's beat-up Honda. Neither of us spoke. The early morning streets were empty except for delivery trucks and the occasional jogger. When we arrived, the hospital was in the quiet lull between night shift and day shift. The nurse at the desk recognized us and waved us through. "He's awake," she said. "Been asking for you, actually." My heart pounded as we walked down the hallway. Outside his room, I paused. "You want me to come in with you?" Marcus asked. I shook my head. "I need to do this alone." He squeezed my shoulder. "I'll be right outside." I pushed open the door. Grandpa Joe was sitting up in bed, looking much better than yesterday. Color had returned to his face. He smiled when he saw me. "Emma, sweetheart, I was hoping you'd come back." I walked slowly to his bedside. "We need to talk." His smile faded slightly. That sounds serious. It is. I pulled up a chair and sat down, my hands folded in my lap. I met someone last night, Victoria, your sister. Grandpa Joe's entire expression changed. His face hardened. What did she say to you? She showed me your bank statement, I said, watching his face carefully. She said you have $900,000 in liquid assets, that you never needed my money. Or Sophie's, that this was all a test. For a long moment, Grandpa Joe said nothing. He just looked at me with those tired, sad eyes. Is it true? I asked, my voice breaking. Did you test us? He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Yes. The single word hit me like a physical blow. But not the way Victoria thinks, he added quickly. Emma, please let me explain. You made me give up everything I had, I said, my voice rising. $15,000. My entire life savings. You knew I'd quit my jobs. You knew I had nothing left. And you had almost $1 million sitting in your account. Tears streamed down my face. How could you do that to me? How could you do that to Sophie? She's a single mother. She gave up her daughter's Christmas. I know, Grandpa Joe said, and his voice cracked. I know what I did, and I know how it looks. But Emma, please, you have to understand why. Then explain it, I said coldly. Because right now, all I see is a manipulative old man who played with people's lives for his own amusement. Grandpa Joe flinched like I'd slapped him. Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think anymore. He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached for a folder on his bedside table, a different one than Margaret had yesterday. Open it, he said quietly. I took the folder and opened it. Inside were medical bills. Hundreds of them. From the past 5 years. Cancer treatments. Experimental therapies. Hospital stays. All for someone named Catherine Whitman. Who is Catherine? I asked. My first wife, Grandpa Joe said softly. Marcus's grandmother. She died of cancer 23 years ago. I looked up at him, confused. These bills aren't hers, he continued. They're from 5 years ago. For another Catherine Whitman. His voice broke. My youngest daughter. From my first marriage. Marcus's aunt. She was only 38. My breath caught. She had the same type of cancer her mother did, Grandpa Joe said, tears streaming down his face. Aggressive, fast. She needed treatment that insurance wouldn't cover. Experimental drugs. Clinical trials. It was expensive. So expensive. He wiped his eyes with a shaking hand. I paid for everything. Every single treatment. Every hospital stay. I spent $3 million trying to save her life. His voice dropped to a whisper. And she died anyway. I sat frozen, the medical bills shaking in my hands. After she died, Grandpa Joe continued, I fell into a deep depression. I stopped caring about money, about investments, about anything. I gave large chunks of it to Robert, to Caroline, to Ashley, thinking maybe if I helped them, they'd care about me the way Catherine had. He laughed bitterly. But they just took it and asked for more. They saw me as an ATM machine. Nothing else. So you tested them, I said quietly. I needed to know, he said desperately. I needed to know if anyone in my family actually loved me, or if they just loved my money. He looked at me with such pain in his eyes. And when they all said no, when they all made excuses, I felt like I was drowning. Like Catherine's death had shown me the truth, that I was utterly alone. Then why test me? I asked. Why involve Sophie? Because you were different, he said simply. You'd married into the family, but you weren't corrupted yet. You still had kindness in your eyes. And when I called you, when I asked for help, his voice broke completely. You said yes without hesitation. You didn't ask what was in it for you. You didn't negotiate. You just helped. And that, Emma, that told me everything I needed to know about who you are. I sat there, the medical bills still in my hands, trying to process everything. So Victoria was right, I said slowly. You did test us. You manipulated the situation to see who would help. Yes, Grandpa Joe admitted. But Emma, I swear to you, I would have paid you back. Every penny, whether you knew it or not. I had already instructed Margaret to set up the trust fund for you before the surgery even happened. That doesn't make it right, I said, my voice shaking. I know. He reached for my hand and I let him take it. I know it was wrong. I know I played with people's emotions and their finances. But I was desperate. I needed to know if there was anyone left in this world who cared about me as a person, not as a bank account. He squeezed my hand gently, and you showed me there was. You and Sophie and Marcus, you all proved that real love still exists. That kindness isn't dead. I pulled my hand away. But you could have just asked us. You could have been honest. Would you have understood? He asked quietly. If I'd said, I have plenty of money, but I want to see if my family loves me, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was paranoid and bitter? I didn't have an answer for that. The truth is, Grandpa Joe continued, people show you who they really are when they think you have nothing. When there's no benefit to being kind. That's when you see their true character. He gestured to the medical bills. I learned that lesson the hard way with Catherine. When she was sick, when she was dying, I saw which friends stayed and which disappeared. I saw who visited her in the hospital and who made excuses. Money doesn't reveal character, Emma. Desperation does. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was fully up now, casting golden light across the hospital parking lot. People were arriving for their shifts, starting their days, living their normal lives. What about Sophie? I asked without turning around. She's a single mother. She gave up everything for you. Was that fair to her? No, Grandpa Joe said firmly. It wasn't fair at all. That's why she's getting $50,000. That's why I'm setting up a college fund for Isabella. I may have tested her, but I'm making damn sure she doesn't suffer for being a good person. I turned around. And Daniel? You said you haven't decided about him yet. What does that mean? Grandpa Joe's expression hardened. That depends on him. On whether he can become the man he should be, or if he's already too much like his parents. He called me 17 times last night, I said quietly. He says he's sorry. Are you going to forgive him? I thought about Daniel standing in that hallway, watching his mother humiliate me, saying nothing. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to. Part of me remembers why I fell in love with him. But another part of me knows that the man I married wouldn't have let that happen. So maybe I never really knew him at all. Grandpa Joe nodded slowly. That's a decision only you can make, sweetheart. But whatever you decide, you have options now. The house is yours. The money is yours. You're not trapped anymore. The door opened and Marcus poked his head in. Everything okay in here? I looked at Grandpa Joe. At this complicated, manipulative, broken old man who'd tested me and hurt me but also given me a way out of a life that was suffocating me. Yeah, I said finally. Everything's okay. Marcus came in, followed by Sophie. She was still in her scrubs, looking exhausted but determined. I came as soon as my shift ended, she said to me. Marcus texted me. Said you found out about the money. Did you know? I asked her. Sophie shook her head. Not until Marcus told me this morning. Mr. Whitman, She looked at him, her expression conflicted. I don't know how to feel about this. I know, Grandpa Joe said gently. And you have every right to be angry with me. Both of you do. I am angry, I said, but I also understand why you did it. And I think... I paused, trying to find the right words. I think maybe you showed us something important too. What's that? Sophie asked. That we're stronger than we thought, I said. That we're capable of incredible generosity. That we're the kind of people who help others even when it costs us everything. I looked at Grandpa Joe. You tested us. But in a way, you also revealed us to ourselves. And that's worth something. Grandpa Joe's eyes filled with tears. You're a remarkable woman, Emma. So is Sophie, I said, smiling at her. And Marcus is pretty great, too. Marcus laughed, wiping his own eyes. We're all pretty messed up, if you ask me. Maybe, Grandpa Joe said. But you're my family now. My real family. And I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure you know how much you mean to me. The door burst open again. Daniel stood there looking like he hadn't slept. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were red and swollen. Emma, he said desperately. Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I looked at Marcus and Sophie. Can you give us a moment? They nodded and filed out, but not before Marcus gave Daniel a warning look. Daniel and I stood on opposite sides of the room. Grandpa Joe watched us both with sad, knowing eyes. I'm listening, I said. Daniel took a deep breath. I was a coward. Yesterday, last night, for the past 8 months, I've been a coward. I let my family treat you like you didn't matter because I was scared of losing them. Of losing their approval, their money, their acceptance. His voice broke. But what I actually lost was you. I lost the one person who actually loved me for who I am, not for what I can give them. Daniel, no, please let me finish, he said urgently. I know I can't fix this with one apology. I know I destroyed your trust, but Emma, I'm asking for a chance. Just one chance to prove I can be the man you deserved from the beginning. I looked at this man I'd married. This man who'd promised to protect me and then failed spectacularly. I need time, I said finally. I need time to figure out who I am without you. Without your family. Without all of this? Daniel's face crumpled. Are you saying it's over? I'm saying I don't know, I said honestly. And I can't make that decision right now. Not after everything that's happened. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. Okay, I understand. But can I call you? Check on you? In a few weeks, I said. Give me a few weeks to clear my head. Okay, he whispered. He looked at Grandpa Joe. I'm sorry, Grandpa. For everything? Grandpa Joe studied him for a long moment. Then prove it. Not with words. With actions. Show Emma, and yourself, who you really are. Daniel nodded and left. The room was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do now? Grandpa Joe asked me. I thought about the house, the money, the freedom I now had to make my own choices. I think, I said slowly, I'm going to take Sophie and Marcus out for breakfast. Real breakfast, not hospital cafeteria food. And then I'm going to go see my new house. Start figuring out what I want my life to look like. Grandpa Joe smiled. That sounds perfect. I walked over and kissed his forehead. Thank you. For everything. Even the parts that hurt. Thank you, he whispered. For saving my life. In more ways than one? I found Marcus and Sophie in the hallway. They looked at me questioningly. Breakfast, I said. My treat. You just inherited a fortune, Sophie laughed. I think you can afford it. We walked out of that hospital together, 3 strangers who'd become family through the strangest circumstances imaginable. The morning sun was warm on my face. The air smelled like coffee and possibilities. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Call me when you're ready. We have paperwork to finalize, and Emma, Joseph told me to tell you that you're free now. Whatever that means to you. I smiled. Free. I was free. Free from a family that never valued me. Free from a marriage that had made me invisible. Free to build a life on my own terms. So what's the house like? Sophie asked as we walked to Marcus's car. I have no idea, I admitted. I've never seen it. Then let's go look, Marcus said, grinning. Let's see your castle, Cinderella. We piled into the car, all 3 of us talking and laughing, making plans for the future. And as we drove away from that hospital, I realized something. Grandpa Joe had tested us. But in doing so, he'd given us something invaluable. He'd shown us our own worth. And that was worth more than any inheritance.